Well, hello, everybody. I would like to welcome you to the World Lizard Global Lizard Debates. And this is the second webinar organized in collaboration with the government of Cape Town. I would like to give thanks to Dr. Lyndon Bois, Chief Director, Sport and Recreation from the Western Cape Department of Cultural Affairs and Sports, for collaborating with World Lizard to organize this important presentation. Today, it is a great pleasure for World Lizard to present the World Lizard Organization Charter for Lizard 2020. World Lizard is a worldwide non-governmental association born in 1952, dedicated to discovering and fostering those conditions for best permitting lizard to serve as a force for human growth, development, and well-being. This is the third revision of the Charter, which was published 50 years ago, and it encompasses important updates and changes in line with emerging social and global issues. Regarding the structure of the presentation, firstly, my colleagues will make a presentation of the Charter. It will take around 50 minutes, and after that, they will answer to your questions. For dissemination and education purposes, this presentation will be recorded. And if you have any questions, doubts, comments, you can write them in the chat tool, and they will be read and answered at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time and we don't have time to answer all the questions, please do not worry. You can upload them in our website, or we will do it, and they will be answered by the leaders of the Charter in the following days. Before I give the floor to my colleagues, I will like to introduce very briefly both of them. Both of them are co-conveners of the task force for the revision of the World Lizard Charter for Lizard. Dr. Atara Sivan is the president of the World Lizard Academy. She is the head of the Department of Education Studies of Hong Kong Baptist University. She is editor-in-chief of the World Lizard Journal and the founder and chairperson of the World Lizard Organization Chapter of Hong Kong, among many other things. And Dr. Tony Veal, he was also a founding fellow of the World Lizard Academy, and he's adjunct professor in the Business School, University of Technology of Sydney, Australia. Now I give the floor to Dr. Atara Sivan, and she will start the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Christina, for the warm welcome, and thanks, Mireia, for the technical support. We can't do without you. And hello, everybody. I can see that we have people from almost all around the world, Turkey, India, Korea, South Africa, Australia, Canada, and so on and so forth. Turkey, and so on and so forth. Sorry if I miss anybody. We are having a very tough schedule. And we also, what we are going to do is basically we're going to share the screen, and I've worked very hard with Tony. You can't not work hard when you associate with Tony. So we have been a team for the past, God knows how many years, and embarking on this very unique and privileged mission to revise this makes us even closer. I'm calling him sometimes over the weekend, said, Tony, it's me, help out. And then Tony said, okay, we have been doing that, let's keep moving. So what I want to do now is to share the screen and go through the basic context and the history of that, and then allow Tony to take over when it comes to the content of this unique charter. So I'm going to basically change the screen, but I cannot do that because it's written that host disabled participant screen sharing. So the host, can you please enable me to share the screen? Okay, Great. Maria. A little bit about that. Yes, I'm a member of the World Leisure Organization, but as a chair of the World Leisure Academy, it is my duty to represent the job that we have been doing under the auspice of the World Leisure Organization. And basically what we're going to do is to share with you the things together. One word about the World Leisure Academy. What we seek is to promote leisure through advocacy, research, and educational endeavor. And therefore, we are all very grateful for the World Leisure Board to give us the opportunity to engage in this very meaningful work of revising the World Leisure Charter for Leisure. This is really privileged to undertake this tiring but inspiring piece of work. So a little bit of a history, and I know that Mary is now for South Africa and some other colleagues, so you will be very happy to hear that it all started here next to the beach in Durban when the World Leisure Organization held the first World Leisure Congress on the African continent. It was in Durban, and every morning I sat with Tony and talked and worked out things, how to do and what to do. And this one basically led us to have the, what we say here is the World Leisure Academy business meeting and workshop. And if I click here, you can see that one thing on the agenda was the workshop by Tony Ville. So this was something that we worked before to basically have Tony inspire people about the idea of human rights and leisure as a starting point to basically revise the World Leisure Charter for the World Leisure Organization Charter for Leisure. So Tony gave us the presentation, and I asked his permission to put his picture. Tony, you look younger now. So what did you do? And he gave a fascinating presentation of leisure and human rights, which started the debate ongoing. So basically, it was June 2016 that we started technically the process. And I'm very touched to say that this webinar is actually initiated and in collaboration with South Africa. So we're going back there, and that's for us closing the loop. So why did we revise the World Leisure Organization Charter for Leisure? Tony will expand on that, but in a nutshell, what we want to say is that the importance and the growing need to recognize human rights in general, and unfortunately, there was insufficient reference to human rights in leisure studies, publication, etc. And we all talk all those years about the World Leisure Organization mission to achieve the leisure as human rights for all. So we have to start somewhere. So there's a great need to achieve the ideal of leisure as the human rights for all that trigger us to basically start in a written form that we are presenting to you today. And what did we do about that to revise? The process was very long, started from 2016, but officially from 2018 all the way to 20, by establishing a special task force, soliciting input, drafting, ongoing communication, posting online, consolidation, and thanks to the board, and I know Joanne as the chairman of the board of World Leisure Organization is with us. Thanks for arranging this approval of the board so we can now present this to everybody. So what I'm going to share with you is basically in a nutshell these components of this process, and I will talk about the context, the material, and the process, and allow Tony to go into details on the actual charter for leisure. The reason I'm showing those colliding circles is to show that each one of them is actually integrated with each other. So if you go to the World Leisure Charter for Leisure, go ahead and look at the materials, how to disseminate it, how to go about it? What messages do we send to the government? And also acknowledge the process that we've gone through, which is not ending now in this presentation. As I spoke to Christina before, this is just something that we begin by doing this webinar. So let's start with the context. We all know about the UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, and those famous 2 articles that everybody who teaches leisure usually put it in the first or second lesson, saying that Article 24, everyone has the right to rest and leisure, including reasonable limitation of working hours and periodic holidays with pay. And Article 27, everyone has the right freely to participate in cultural life of the community and to enjoy the arts. Those are articles that were there endorsed and disseminated, but this was only the beginning. The reason I'm showing that is that the revision of the World Leisure Organization Charter for Leisure is basically in line with this UDHR. And therefore, and I know Tony will extend on that, we are not there to start deliberating what is the meaning of leisure. We are not. We are rather focusing on the issue of human rights. And that is the main aim of coming up with this charter. And we have supporting materials, and thanks so much for the World Leisure Secretariat to set it in a very short period of time. We have the website that you can go in. We have the leisure rights portal where people can get in and write things and everything. This is just a snapshot of the part of that. And this is the supporting material that we would like to continue activating. So we don't want that to be like a book, excuse me, academics, of a top-tier journal that sits somewhere on a shelf and nobody reads. We would like to make a societal and international impact. And that's why we put it up to the world on this website. And immediately after the meeting, we will sit together with the World Leisure Secretariat and work out additional channel how to best disseminate and activate it. It is just not just a piece of work that should sit somewhere published. It's an active piece of idea. And the materials for governments, in addition to the charter itself, it's already there, a supporting material. If you have any contact with the government and you are not afraid to speak, like in some places in the world, then by all means, go and share those things. This material talks about leisure in general, talks about different notions and calls for inclusiveness or inclusion, right for women, right for people with special needs, right for elderly, right for children, those that work, those that don't work, and so on and so forth to have the leisure. And then there are issues related to sports. There are also some publication around that. And art and culture, everybody has the right for enjoying the culture and the art. And of course, travel and tourism, which allows people to go around the world. Unfortunately, in these COVID times, we have to do it virtually, but still the idea is the right for travel and tourism. So our charter is in a very good position because in a way, leisure encompasses all those things. So we should take the lead in this direction. And the educational materials that we post there, we are all strong believer, especially me, sorry to speak for everybody else, in lifelong learning. And that's why I put picture from school, kindergarten, university, and continuing education. So we believe that this charter could serve everybody. What we say in my area, education, at food train education, it's never too late to make reference to it in different areas. And there are reading materials there, and there are also questions and exercises, courtesy of Tony, to share with us. As I spoke with Tony before, some of those questions may be difficult to ask in some contexts and cultures. By all means, come with the relevant question that work for your own context, culture, and so on. So we will be more inclusive. And the next is a process, just to, in one page, to show what we've done in sleepless nights, but also happy moments. Started the first draft in 2016 to 18. We established a task force for the revision of the World Leisure Charter for leisure. In Hong Kong, they like acronyms, so it's TFRCL. We solicited view of the second draft, prepared the third draft, and then invited leading organization chairs to contact people to solicit more views of their associations. This led us to the fourth draft. And after the fourth draft was almost there, we posted the draft with the help of the Secretariat on the World Leisure website with invitation for comments. We did receive more comments from the public. And then eventually we wrap it up by soliciting the board members of World Leisure Organization, their comments and endorsement, and which was now in 2020. And now what you see on the website and what we talk about today is basically the final revised World Leisure Chapter of World Leisure Organization Charter for Leisure. So this is the process. It takes me 2 minutes to summarize 4 years of my life. That's breaking the record. So there is no work without recognition. So I just would like to snapshot the names of people that actually make their contribution here. So you can see they come from 4 different continents from around the world. It is not just Anglophobic. We also have some Anglophone. We have Polish, we have Korea, we have Spanish, and people speak different languages. And we have also the associations. We sent to several associations, and those associations took the time and courtesy to respond. If the chair representative of this association is listening to this webinar, here is our personal thanks: Academy for Leisure Sciences, ENSAL, Australian and New Zealand Association for Leisure Studies, chapter, Hong Kong chapter, World Leisure Organization, and of course, members of World Leisure Board of Directors, collectively and individually. But we can't do all this without special thanks to the World Leisure Secretariat, Christina, Mireia, and Isabel, and all others for being there for us, to support and to help us to disseminate it. And this is, we are continuing with that direction now. So I've been basically covering the context, material, and the process, and leave the feedback out. And I would like to hand over to Tony to talk about the actual World Leisure Charter, its content. So for doing that, I need to basically escape. I'm looking where to do that. Hold on, Tony, in a minute. Okay, I have to close down, which I cannot, okay. Stop sharing. Here we go. Tony, go ahead and share.
Thank you, Atara. I have to apologize in advance because this is the first time I've done a live before. I've done various Zoom conferences, but not with PowerPoint. And so if the screen goes black, and you'll have to talk amongst yourselves while the Secretariat rescues me.
I have to say that Tony is very humble. If the screen goes black, he can actually say it without the screen because he knows it by heart.
Anyway, so I'm going to try, and I'm not quite sure that I've...
Share screen?
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure I've got it. Share screen. And I had to find which document to share. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm only getting a picture of Atara. Perhaps I need to get that PowerPoint up. I'm sorry.
Take your time.
I'm hitting share screen, and then I'm getting Zoom. I'm not able to get the PowerPoint up. We did it before today, but I can't manage it. I may just have to talk. Will that be all right?
Yeah, do you want me to screen yours? I can look for that while you're talking.
Okay.
Okay, keep talking and I will look for that.
Okay, well, I'm sorry for that. What I'm going to, what I have to say is divided into four sections and a very brief conclusion. So the first is introduction, and then some material on the UN human rights system, which we're trying to relate to, and then the process of revising the Charter, and then the revised Charter itself, and taking you through it.
Here you go, Tony.
Ah, here we are. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, here you go.
Here we go. That's it. Right.
We won't talk about the supporting material, but doesn't matter. You go ahead. You tell me when to move on.
Okay. Thank you. Now I'm not getting the thing to move now.
I can move for you. You tell me.
Oh, all right. Yes. We'll move on to the next slide then, please. Right. Introduction. Now, there's several points. So if I'll shout when I want the next stop. Oh, right. Okay. No. Right. Leave that. The first point I want to make then, that leisure is a right. And this is as stated, as Atara said, in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was in 1948. And I noticed as we speak, I think yesterday or today, the UN is actually in New York, I think, celebrating its 75th anniversary, which was obviously in the 3 years before that. But one of the first things they did was to set up the committee to draft the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in '48. And just a couple of years after that, the International Recreation Association was founded in 1952, which is now the WLO. And as Atara said, the Charter for Leisure was published initially in 1970 and has been revised twice since then, and this is the third revision. So the question is why? And Atara mentioned the context in which this was done, and I started looking at the whole question of having taught the issue of human rights in the public policy courses I did for our leisure students in Sydney. When I retired, I decided to write an article on it, and what I found is that there was certainly a neglect by academics of leisure studies academics of the concept of human rights. And you might say, well, world leisure is not just academics, but academics are actually responsible for teaching the people who become practitioners in the leisure field. And so it's not just a group of academics that get involved with what academics have to say. So it seemed to me quite important. And I had been putting this idea for students for a couple of decades, but notice that not very many other people did it. There wasn't a complete absence, but it was very rare. And there are a number of reasons for this, which I won't go into now, but to do with the sort of disciplines we associated with, and the leaderships of various countries and so on, who either do or do not support the idea of an international system of human rights. The other thing that occurred to us in discussing this in Durban was that there was a great need for the Charter to be much more aligned with the UN human rights system. If it was a right declared by the UN, then why weren't we making use of this relationship? So, going to the next slide, to Tara. Right. The human rights system. This is just part of the human rights system, obviously, but there is the Declaration and two covenants, which were published in 1966. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the ICESCR. And it's that second one that we are concerned with. And the system then is overseen by the United Nations Human Rights Council. So if we go to the next slide, Atara. Right. The legal context. This came as news to me when I started to look at this, that the Universal Declaration is signed up to by all UN member countries, but it's not a legal document. It's an expression of, it's an aspirational document of a statement of values, if you like. And we know the UN is an imperfect body, but nevertheless, that's an ideal that is put before every member. But the international covenants are legal treaties. Now again, we know the UN is not a perfect agency, so this is legal in international law terms, which, you know, we all know its limitations, but nevertheless there it is. Now, when countries ratify these covenants, they undertake, make a legal commitment, if you like, to secure both civil and political rights and economic, social and cultural rights. Now, having done that, having ratified that, they then are required to submit periodical reports to the Human Rights Council on their progress in achieving this. And these reports are evaluated. Now, we are familiar with this in high profile things like racism and you know, equal rights before the law and that sort of thing, which governments, particularly the civil and political rights, because there are things like Human Rights Watch and that sort of organization which pick up on these things and report on these things, and it appears in the media. But there are also reports on all the other economic, social and cultural rights. And all this comes under the ICESCR, and the economic and social cultural rights exist. They have been subject to criticism quite a lot, particularly the leisure rights. There are academics who say that these shouldn't be rights at all. But the United Nations has asserted that the UDH rights are a package and are, in their terms, universal, indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated. And it's interesting to reflect that in 72 years, 71 years, they've been enunciated that people haven't, the UN has insisted in continuing to hold this body of human rights together as a package and not to whittle away at it. And so leisure as a human right is still there 75 years later. So the next slide, Tara. I'm now going to just look briefly at these, the rights as they're enunciated, not in the Universal Declaration, but in these covenants, because, or in this particular covenants, the Economic, Social and Cultural Rights Covenant, because this is the legal commitment which countries sign up to. This is not aspirational. It's a commitment. So countries, when they ratify these covenants, that is, when they're passed by their elected assemblies, their parliament or Congress, then they commit to ensuring just and favourable conditions of work, including rest and leisure and reasonable limitation to working hours and periodic holidays with pay. That's the right as enunciated. And then also to take part in cultural life. And the first of these is under Article 7D. And it's worth noting that it relates to people who are in paid employment. And that it's overseen by the International Labour Organization. And that organization was established between the wars. It was an outcome of the First World War to control or trying to keep limitations on working hours so that there wasn't a beggar my neighbor approach to international trade. And that organization was incorporated into the UN in the 1940s. And again, there's a peculiarity of these things is that they don't mention leisure as such, but cultural life. However, in subsequent documents, culture is defined, not in the covenant, but in later documents, is defined by the UN as including leisure activities and requiring leisure facilities. So this is what people sign up, or organizations, governments sign up to. Now, if we keep clicking, hold on, right, okay. Thanks for that, Atara. Now, revising the Charter, there sort of issues emerged as we discussed the task. The main ones I want to talk about here are just really two. The first is that the Charter does not need to make a case for leisure, which I think the previous versions did. That case is basically already made in the UN documents, and I'll refer to these two documents, the Declaration and the Covenant, as the original documents, if you like, or the core documents. That was already established leisure as a human right, and it's signed up to by the nations of the world. So we don't have to make that case, it's already there. What we should be doing is reinforcing this. The other issue which Atara mentioned as well was that the question is, should we define leisure in the Charter, or should we take the UN terminology and work with that? And it's decided that we should work with those concepts so that we were locked in, if you like, to the UN system and its terminology. And so we can say that's what the nation states have signed up to, not some idea that we have, but the idea that they have. Now, and in regard to leisure, it seems that the word leisure appears in the documents, but the main focus is on culture and limitation of working hours. So it's a time and a cultural activity concept. And you could say that what is being used in the original documents is a sort of common sense definition, which even the academic textbooks say that is a valid concept in the sense it's what appears in the language. Everybody knows what they mean when they say leisure. Yeah, it's not an obscure academic term. It's a term used in everyday conversation. And I also mentioned in the earlier slide that culture is defined in later documents to include leisure. So we're just taking on board the idea of culture rather than superimposing the term leisure. The other reason for really ducking this task, if you like, which some people I think we should have done, is the enormous lack of consensus on how to define leisure and the enormous controversy and amongst academics in particular on what leisure is and how it should be conceived. And we can certainly talk about that if people want to in questions and answers. And so that's the principles that we implemented. So next slide, please, Tara. And the terms in the charter are in blue, and if you've downloaded it, you've got it in front of you. So I won't. I'll just read them through quickly so that people, for the record, if you like, and not all of them are in full like this, and I'll say when I summarise. And the comments in black are sort of comments on those particular. Each article, and there's 7 articles altogether. So the first one is that everyone, whether adult or child, has the right to adequate time for rest and for the pursuit of leisure activities. So this is hiving off the first part of the core documents terminology, and saying at least this, the right to time and to be able to engage in leisure activity, is a human right. And then it's this Article 2 separates out that work-related concept, because it says Article 10, for those in remunerated work, Article 1 requires the recognition of reasonable limitation of working hours and periodic holidays of pay, as well as remuneration for public holidays. And securing these rights generally requires national or provincial legislation. And so this is confirming the employment-related status of the time and time off and limitation of working hours for working people or people in paid employment, and the link with the ILO. And then the Article 3 says that this is now, in the modern age, we moved beyond what was being talked about in the 1940s, and we now say that the first item should apply to those engaged in unpaid labor, for example, domestic caregivers. So it widens the concept to include non-employed groups. Next slide, please, Tara. Articles 4 to 5. Article 4 is that concept more or less straight from the original documents. Everyone has the right to freely participate in the cultural life of the community. In the Charter, we actually quote the definition of culture and the list of cultural and leisure facilities which appear in later UN documents. So we're locking that in, that this concerns culture. Article 5 is leisure as a medium through which other rights and related benefits set out in the UDR, etc., can be exercised. And this includes physical and mental and social development of the child, support for the family life, personal expression and development, sustaining of cultural life of the community, promotion of physical and mental health and well-being. Now, these are all rights which are mentioned elsewhere in the original documents and in other covenants and statements. So there is a covenant on the rights of the child. So we're saying, yes, we have to, support that. Leisure is related to that issue. There is, in the UDHR, talks about the importance of family life. So we're saying, yes, leisure is all about that. In part is all about that. There's about people being allowed to have the right for personal expression and development. It talks elsewhere in the document about the cultural life of the community, and we say, yes, leisure is about this, and also about mental health and well-being and sport and physical activity. Yes, we say we are involved with these health and well-being issues. So it's really to tying this charter in with all the other charters, and in the context document that's on the website, all these other charters and so on are listed, so that we see that we're tied into the Charter of the Rights of the Child and the Charter for limitation or abolition of discrimination ethnically and against women and so on. There's and the Charter for people with disabilities. So it's locking leisure charter in with all the other rights that exist. So, Atara, if we go to the next one. And then this is a version of what was in the previous charters, and that is, the previous charter was criticized for concentrating on government only. So this makes the point that even though governments sign up to it and have an oversight and ultimately responsible for reporting on human rights, leisure is involved with commercial, educational, professional bodies and non-government organizations. So any government trying to secure human rights has to work through and with these other types of organizations. So if we can go to the next one, Tara. The final one is then coming back to government and saying, yes, we recognize that there are limited resources, and that governments and local, regional, national face many challenges and competing demands, but they nevertheless have particular responsibilities. And this is summarized rather than full text. And again, these relate to sort of real issues which governments become involved with, which are, again, connecting with other rights documents. But the sort of thing which governments produce policies on. So, so at local level, often open space is probably the most commonly provided resource for leisure. Natural and cultural heritage, children's play facilities, sport and exercise facilities. The principle that all these things should be accessible for all members of the community, regardless of age, gender, etc. The issue of training of a workforce for the leisure sector, the issue of conducting research for the sector, the fact that national provincial legislation and regulations may be involved, and that they're necessary to produce specific plans at national, regional level to implement these aspirations. And it also refers to, once again, the fact that it's in the original Universal Declaration that in implementing any one right or one set of rights, you should have anyone, and organizations and governments particularly, should have respect and acknowledgement and should not infringe the other rights which we're trying to secure and protect. So the next slide, please, Atara. Now, in fact, Atara is using the version of the PowerPoint I sent to her before we discussed this, and Atara said she'd covered supporting materials, so and I did delete this in the final version, so we can skip that and go to the next one.
And then the conclusion to follow.
And I had written in a conclusion here, and really it was just going to be one conclusion, and that is that leisure is a human right. It's been recognized by the United Nations as such, and that the World Leisure Organization and its community should engage with that idea. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, great, Tony. So this is again in a nutshell a work of a lot of things. I remember one time when I was on the phone with Tony, he said, I feel like there is a very serious reviewer that keeps on reviewing the draft that we are doing with very serious comments. Yes, I read all the comments. I just want to say that the comments were basically those that Tony just put up front now. People ask for the definition of leisure and ask to go back to basics. And we were responding by saying that it's about the common sense and we have to start somewhere. Otherwise, if we are dealing with the definition, then we don't have time to actually talk about the human rights, because the definition of leisure could be another book of 2 or 10 books. So thanks, Tony, for this great explanation. And this is not the end, but only the beginning of a process. So Forward-looking, what we need is you and other people providing feedback, or we want to hear voices. So we open up a debate or dialogue, share your experience or experiences, and contribute to the educational material, bibliography, and literature, and any other input. As Christina said, I can see that there are at least 3 questions from the participants now. So we will try to attend to those questions if we can. Not all teachers can answer all the questions right on the spot, but in any case, we will be following up and inviting people to put their voices there on the web and open a debate. I'm sitting on the east side of the world. There are people that are sitting on the west side and down under. We come from different culture. I myself grew up in the Middle East, and here I am in the Far East, and I'm working with people in Spain and in America and Turkey and everywhere. And each one has a different point of view. A government have different policies, and the material can be adjusted. We talked today about empowering, we talked about self-directed learning, especially in times of the COVID-19. So this is our chance to disseminate it. I'm sure we will hold more webinars, but we will call you to state firm your ideas and share your experience. We have special interest groups of the World Leisure Organization. They are a wonderful platform for further sharing and dissemination. So this is just a big thank you for you for being with us for, as we say, 50 minutes. And I will stop sharing and try to see the Q&A session. I can see that several people have written some questions. Christina, do you want to say something before I proceed?
Thank you very much for this great presentation. And as you said, now it is the turn of participants to ask for questions. There are already 3 of them in the chat, and please feel free, both of you, to answer to them. Thank you.
Okay, so I will read out the questions. The first one from New Zealand. Article 24 of the UDHR states, everyone has the right to rest and leisure, including reasonable limitation of working hours and periodic holidays with pay. When you think of leisure, who are the figures who form your definition? There is plurality of historical and contemporary contributions. Also, another question, are World Leisure Organizations forming a policy on the relationship of leisure to basic income? I think there is the question, it continue, but maybe we could just start here and then try to answer, because the same question continue to ask, the same person continue to ask the question. Tony, anything you want to say here about the, when we think about leisure, who are the figures who form?
We're drafting an article for the World Leisure Journal on this, really reflecting what we've been talking about today. And there we're able to go in a bit more detail to this whole issue of definition of leisure, and point out that the lack of agreement amongst academics on what leisure constitutes. And we don't solve the problem, we just sort of expand on the nature of the challenge that we're faced. And maybe I can just use a bit of my own recent experience that and it refers to, I think, 2 pieces of writing I've done. One of them, which I won't hold it up, but I did publish a book called Whatever Happened to the Leisure Society. And of course, the most well-known figure, and he is a major figure, was Geoffroy de Mazdier, the French sociologist who's like the father of leisure studies in Europe, you could say. And in the presentation in Durban, I actually put up a quotation from him, because he actually was one of the early people to say that leisure has become a right. Now, but his most interesting, even though his book, and the reason why I was looking at it, is called Towards a Society of Leisure. In fact, it wasn't very much about the Society of Leisure. It was mostly a sociology of leisure in France in the 1950s and 60s. And what he was mostly quoted for was his definition of leisure. And this was a functional definition, and it reflects the United Nations need for diversion and entertainment, and then for personal development. And I've recently written an article for World Leisure Journal on this whole thing. Is there enough leisure time? And going back to that definition. But I also wrote a piece because I discovered that in his, and this doesn't seem to have been picked up by anyone else, or not anyone that I've noticed anyway, that in 1974, when he wrote his Sociology of Leisure book, Dumasdier dismissed this leisure definition from 1967, which everybody kept quoting and still quotes, but he said, forget it. And he put forward a new definition, which said that the word leisure should be reserved for his third category, which is personal development and self-realization and that sort of concept, which is an Aristotelian concept of leisure. And so there are two definitions, functional and philosophical and moral, if you like, which comes from Aristotle. And there are others. And so that's the issue and the problem. But so Dumasdier, I think, is almost the starting point, although obviously he is referring back to Aristotle. So right. There's a couple of figures for you.
Yeah, and I agree with you that a lot of people still quote this definition. And about the second question, I don't know if Christina can respond, but may not. Are World Leisure forming a policy on the relationship of leisure to basic income? Christina, any thought about that?
Well, what Christina's thinking about it, I could say something about it, and that is that because this cropped up in the book I was writing, because whenever I said I was talking about the Leisure Society, people would say this to me, and it's been very much in the news about the universal basic income, and what I honed in on with the book and with subsequent writing is the whole idea of the limitation of working hours, and that somehow we'd stop thinking about that as a leisure studies community some time ago, but all sorts of other people are thinking about it. But my view was that what we're trying to do is, my view is that we should be trying to do is to carry on the process of limiting working hours. What's the magic about a 40-hour week? And that we should carry on reducing working hours. And it seemed to me that the universal basic income is in a way an admission of defeat on that ground, because it's saying, well, we're not going to be able to find work for everybody, so we'll just pay people to be idle, quotes unquote. I think we should continue. I mean, we have welfare and so on, and unemployment pay, and all that. The idea still is to find work for all. I mean, that is still what people want. People want leisure for all, but they want work for all as well. And if you introduce universal basic income, you admit defeat, it seems to me. So that's my comment on that. I don't know. But I'm sure that wouldn't be the WLO policy.
No. But since you mentioned the work, I think it leads directly to the third question, which actually I have some experience for my own study in Hong Kong, is the contemporary expression, work-life balance, that rolls easily off the tongue, an example of false equivalence by equating the value of work to life. I cannot have the answer, but I can have a practical answer by saying that you know, in Hong Kong, people work around the clock. the concept of leisure is not a value by itself, but it's something that people are practicing without giving the value. Basically, they need to work hard to sustain their living in a most expensive place in the world in that respect. And they offer a lot of workshop on work-life balance. And basically, I think they do equate the value of work to life. This is from my context. And when we came and tried to do workshop on leisure education, somebody wrote to me and said, what is leisure? It's not tangible. It's not a tangible thing. I don't know what to do with it. So I think the equation of the value of work to life does exist in several countries and places, and Hong Kong is one of them. Don't know if anybody else would like to join this and share. That we'll leave the floor open.
Well,
Work-life balance.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Well, I can come in again if you like.
Okay, sure.
Might stimulate some of the people, but and I'm blowing my own trumpet. But of course, you know, this is all in the area which I've been interested in thinking about and writing about recently, and I have written a bit about that in the World Leisure Journal article on is there enough leisure time, and of course it's not really leisure studies people that have been writing about work-life balance, and by and large, certainly not making the headlines with it. It's people from all sorts of other areas of thinking, from economists to feminists to environmentalists, have been talking about these things. So my view is that leisure people should be starting to think about this issue. And if the terminology needs to be changed, then so be it. The leisure studies people might want to make a contribution in that regard. But I do notice that both, for instance, Tony Blackshaw and one or two of the non-leisure feminist writers I've been reading about do talk about moving away from almost compartmentalizing leisure and work and family life, and saying really what we're all engaged in is actually designing a life or creating a life which involves leisure, family, work, community, and all, that's what we're juggling, all those things, and it all adds up to life. So I think when people use the word work-life balance, I think it's the work which is central, as Tara is saying, but it's central in a lot of countries, and people's existence depends on work.
Yes.
So they start with that and they say, and there's the rest of it. How do I fit it all in? And my view is that we should reduce the amount of time we spend on work. But,
right. Thanks, Tony. And I think John would like to comment as well. John?
Well, thank you to Tony, Tara, and World Leisure for organizing the webinar. I've always been challenged by this idea of work-life balance. It's sort of like you get a bit of this and a bit of that, and it's sort of, you know, you'll have something that's, you know, evens out. I've always tried to think of it, and I certainly use this a lot in my teaching, to think about work-life harmony. And that it's not a bit of this and a bit of that. And we all know how nice it is when you hear great ensemble and different musical notes are blended to create something different than the individual pieces. And so I guess my contribution to this, and I don't want to dwell on it too much, is that maybe we should think about work-life harmony and how our lives are blended with work and leisure and a whole range of other things that brings us to something that creates that quality of life. Because, you know, as I'm sure Tony and Atara can attest to, you often get leisure experiences while you're working, and many of us do that, and we appreciate it because of the nature of our industry. But let's think about it, maybe not a balance perspective, but more in a harmony perspective. And I'll leave it at that.
Yes, it's great. John, I totally agree with you. In one of the articles about people in Hong Kong, I actually drew the concept of yin-yang in terms of harmony and contrasting and complementing stuff. And it seems to be captured quite nicely, especially in this side of the world, when the Eastern ideas of yin-yang has been there very strongly. So unless somebody wants to talk about the work life, I still have some comments that people say, so maybe I will go through that first.
Can I chip in there, please, Tara?
Yes?
Kia ora. Sean, I'm in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Thank you for letting me take part. Just a brief couple of comments about work-life balance. Māori people have an expression, we hear in speech making, they say boldly and articulately, te he muri ora, which translates to behold, there is life. Now, I suppose we change that word and make it behold, there is work. It just wouldn't have the same ring to it. In other words, it's saying that life, the value of life transcends that of work. The reason for the question about basic income is because there's an associated term of the precariat, which is a new class of workers who have a great deal of insecurity in their lives because of gig work and temporary labour. There's not the same amount of security that there was. So in that respect, work is not the same as, providing value for people. Minimum wages and it's inconsistent with Article 25 of the Universal Declaration. So that was really for the basic income question. And I just want to point out that I'm just writing an article for Recreation Aotearoa that's due tomorrow. And there are so many thoughts I could contribute about this concept, but the concept of leisure is very interesting to me. I thank Tony for his comment about Aristotle, because I agree very much with the state of mind definition, and especially Joseph Pieper, Sebastian de Gracia, and those sort of figures who have written about leisure. We conceptualize it based on the work of figures, and we bring them all together to form our concept of what it means. I trained as a recreation therapist, and I think it needs a great deal of respect from politicians, and it's just not there at the moment. That's our work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sean. And I wanted to move a little bit from the work to the culture. There's an interesting comment here. It seems that the meaning of cultural is still unclear. This includes the problem of the view of world and human beings. But apart from such a philosophical definition, it has a problem of the political system called democracy. How are you thinking about it? I will not talk about democracy being in Hong Kong, so I would allow other people to talk about or refer to that. Tony, I can see in your eyes that you want to say, we had a discussion about that before.
Yes, well, yeah, yes. I mean, can I say the point that didn't emerge in the presentation was that, which is made in the article which we're drafting, is that the United Nations, having put that word culture there and created a UNESCO, which is a whole organization devoted to partly to culture, has not explored culture as a mass phenomenon, if you like. It's tended to understandably concentrate on certainly the way of life concept of culture, which rather than high culture, but it's been concerned with those groups in societies around the world, often indigenous and so on, or that sort of minority situation, who have been denied the opportunity to pursue their way of life as they would wish to do so. And that is very good, and what the United Nations should be very much concerned with. But the sort of, and we are concerned with that as well, I would hope, in the World Leisure Organization. But what we're also concerned with is the idea of, if you like, mass culture, or the access to the culture of the masses, of the mainstream culture, if you like. And some of it is about the access of minorities to mainstream, but it's also about the access of the majority to the mainstream, i.e., does everybody have the opportunity to enjoy the arts and culture and the whole range of leisure facilities? So it's actually a mass thing. Now, to my mind, the UN has not really addressed that because they've been otherwise preoccupied. You know, they have a rapporteurs on culture and so on, and reports and conferences, but they've not really looked at the leisure aspects of culture. So I think that's a role that the World Leisure Organization could play in considering how all this fits together, including.
And in addition to that, it seems like our role of the Charter goes beyond that.
Oh, you've frozen up.
I just want to share Mary's comment. It's still a difficult concept to explain, and especially in relation to recreation and sports, and she hopes that the Charter could be used as a point of departure to clarify this concept. So I do hope that it will be, because that's quite a number, that's a representative of quite a number of places where this concept does not exist. And I would like to refer to Peter Nichols. I can't agree with you more that COVID-19 is definitely having a global dramatic impact or benefit of in relation to mental fitness. As a counselor by training and specializing in trauma, you won't believe how many people had to give online counseling ad hoc because of mental breakdown, because of a fear, anxiety, and everything. So I think what you mentioned, Peter, is extremely important, and we should actually come along and talk about it, not just human rights, but leisure in uncertain times. And leisure where you can't actually go out and you can only do Zoom, you can hug people through Zoom, you can do fitness through Zoom, but the social distance or the physical distance, the right way to say, is there. So thanks, Peter, and please go ahead. Peter, just unmute yourself, unmute yourself. Peter, I can't hear you, just unmute yourself.
No,
thanks,
hear me now. Thank you, Atara. Long time no see, lovely to see you again. Yes, look, I'm now working as a life mentor of using a lot of my recreation experience and leisure experience in life after work. And I really am finding, whereas for years we've fought madly against the work ethic, you know, which didn't want to know leisure, suddenly people are saying parks are keeping me sane. And this public, ordinary person in the street recognition is having a powerful impact all around, certainly in the area of work I do. But because it's global, it is really so. I think it's because even in the last 20 years, leisure has been getting a slightly better recognition than it was because stress has been so much. But just this last 3 months has been quite dramatic. And on this whole area that we're talking about today, I can see quite a different thinking worldwide on this whole area. I actually prefer the word recreation to leisure, but that's another topic. Thanks, Natara.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Yeah. Well, we don't have comments, but we are happy to hear more voices. I don't know.
Just to respond to Peter's point about recreation, we also avoided that.
No?
Sorry, have you got me, Tara?
Yes, yes.
Oh, yes. We also avoided recreation, except that we slipped it in. You may have noticed on one of this where we talk about open space and refer to open space for recreation, because that's the term that's usually used in conjunction with open space. So there is a recognition of the word recreation in the document.
Yes, I appreciate that because we can go into details. I remember quite a long time ago when I was still young as a student joining the Charter for Leisure Education, and there was a big discussion between recreation and animation. And the Europeans were almost leaving the room because they insisted there is no recreation, there's only animation. So we can go on to describe those words. The important part is the substance behind this word. So we can say human rights, and what's the substance behind human rights in different contexts makes a big difference here. I threw a bomb here. I see the silence, but whoever wants to speak, we still have some time. Yes, Benu. Benu?
Hello, everyone. Good to see
Hi.
you, Atara, after so long, and
Here
Tony.
again, yeah.
Hi, Christina, and all together. I just wanted to mention one thing, because this is something which we actually teach under our course curriculum. There is a very thin line between, if we say about recreation and leisure. Recreation is something, because some friends are specifically asking about what is we are talking about recreation, what we are talking about the leisure. So recreation is those activities which actually indulge ourselves in recreating our body. Whichever kind of work we are doing, it is antagonist way of involving ourselves into something, whereas leisure is more into our mental health, which gives us relieving and relaxing ourselves. So that is the major difference between these two things. And when we talk about our WLO, we are concentrating into the activities which are indulging us into the leisure activities more than only recreating activities. So that is, I just wanted to mention, because number of people are asking that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Benu. Good. So any more comments, questions? We do have a few minutes before we wrap up. Christina will take the lead, tell me when we should stop. As I said, it's just the beginning, and there's a lot to talk about, but we would like to make an impact. I think the impact is the important element, and impact starts with the talking, sharing, brainstorming, and debating. So I think this is very important that we were given this platform to start with, and I would allow a few more minutes to questions, comments, if any. And I would hand it back to Christina. And the good thing about that, Christina, is thanks to you, I see people that I haven't seen for ages, and they all look so nice and beautiful. So I would like to hug them all. They're smiling and they know whom I'm talking about. Okay.
Can I just follow up on your comment about making connections?
Yes.
Just with a little personal experience, and one of the reasons why we've got the information there for governments is I did a consultancy many years ago, 20 years ago now, and for a local council on their recreation plan. And I thought, perhaps I'll put something in this document, which I didn't ask for, about human rights. So I just created a sort of box and put 2 or 3 quotations from the Universal Declaration, probably the WLO Charter as it then was, and probably one of the sport charters. And I thought they can knock it out if they want to knock it out. But they didn't, and they kept it in there. So in this council document in Sydney is a statement of the right to leisure in this local council document. Now, I don't know what effect it had on people that read the document or the councillors, but it was a toehold, I thought. And I think if more people do that, that's just one little simple example. So that's why that material is there, that it's nice little quotes that people can select from and insert at suitable places, especially when you're dealing with the public sector and governments and things like that. So
thanks
just
for the inspiration, Tony. Thanks for the inspiration.
Welcome.
Yes, Peter.
I just want to say how I much appreciate being doing it on Zoom like this. I think Zoom is opening up a tremendous means of communication right across the world that we've not had before. Emails are wonderful, but to actually be able to have this sort of discussion worldwide is terrific. And I think for an organisation like the World Leisure Organisation, we really need to do this sort of thing as often as possible. Thank you.
Thanks. And Miklos.
Hello, everybody. So I need your hug. from Hong Kong and from all over the world during this COVID time. I just watched your presentation with my students in Hungary. And of course, we are talking on leisure recreation, and we created a new word called recreology. And many people are asking, what is it about? And we are saying that we are inviting for help different sciences, how to contribute for a quality of life. Because leisure is a driving force, you know, how to live the life better. But our governments do know what is quality of life. Do I have the right to live the qualitative life? So my question would be to Tony, what do you think about it? Do they understand this concept?
Well, I think governments do understand quality of life, because every so often it becomes a buzzword, and suddenly you find reports on quality of life and so on, whereas before it said recreation. Or sometimes it's to do with amalgamation of departments, so they realize they don't just have sport, they now have facilities for old people and day centers and things, and so what a broader concept. And I again, maybe 10 years ago now, I remember giving I was invited to give a presentation to the council where I now live on leisure recreation, and the recreation, one of the or theory or whatever I've been talking about, how does it relate to wellness? And I hadn't really thought about the word wellness, but that was their word of the moment, and all their reports talked about wellness, you know. And so I think concepts and words come and go. There's a fashion about them sometimes, and I think probably what we need to be doing is to be able to, for instance, John Howarth and forget who else he was writing with, wrote an article in Leisure Studies recently, I think, suggesting that wellness should be the dominant theme, not leisure, you know. So but I think probably all these concepts we have are probably being used by different groups in different countries at different times. And the World Leisure Organization really has to try to be all things to all people. And so I think, you know, it would be nice to see some of this supporting materials, to have short essays on each one of these concepts, so that, you know, if somebody, you could refer to the World Leisure Organization's discussion on recreation, or on work-life balance, or on wellness, or on recreation, or on quality of life, because the words are probably current and somewhere all the time. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a long discussion about this issue, sure. Yeah. But we are all responsible to discuss on it and give information to yes, everybody. Yeah.
I think we'd have to find ways of not only having these discussions, but helping them move things forward, I suppose, through the website, or somehow, or through written materials. The World Leisure Journal, for instance, could play a role in some of this, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, by all means, just since you mentioned that, and I'm still the editor of the journal, in the coming issue, board members and their colleagues, just disseminating short reflections on leisure during COVID-19. And of course, it's too premature to do any research now, but I think this is a very important element, as Peter said. So to get a reflection, and I tried to go and pick up the main themes and do a cover note on that in the coming journal. So if you are a subscriber to the journal, by all means, go ahead and add your viewpoints. We have people from all around the world sharing, and there are some common themes, and leisure does seem to change the way it is practiced and even believed when we are all in so-called enforced leisure, staying at home and doing what we are doing now, Zoom. So by all means, call it up, and I would welcome any short necessarily a full research paper to make a societal impact. Yes, Bulent. Yes, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, sorry for my late response. I wish to express my special thanks, first of all, to World Leisure organizations, because they gave us big chance to hear your voice, and from all over the world by the academicians. My question is not only to you, but also to Tony Weir. Maybe Tony Weir started his speech with mostly academicians neglected to study the human rights and leisure. Yes, you are completely right, and I agree with you. I would like to hear your ideas. Maybe we should start our job by teaching the kids and childs leisure as a human rights is the rights for all children and kids. Why don't we start our job by teaching kids and childs? This is the rights for all the people. And my second question is to again Atara Siwan. Do you think a special issue about human rights and leisure in World Leisure Journal? Thank you very much for everyone to listen to me, and many regards from Turkey for everyone.
Thank you. Tony, you are the first.
Okay, yes, children. Two things really. One is the education section of the website now has teaching materials, but I think they could be used for high school, senior high school children, because the work the material I put in there is for tertiary education, university education, really. It's from some of it from my own textbook, for example. But it strikes me that it would be useful to have somebody with skills in primary education to develop some materials for young children on this. You know, what sort of terminology does one use? I don't even know. It's not my field. The other thing I would say about children is that there is a separate charter, a covenant on the rights of the child, which includes the right to play and so on, and freedom of play. It's the charter, the covenant, which has got the most signatures of all the United Nations documents. In the case of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, for example, there are about 25 nations who have not ratified that thing. So it's still 100 and something that have. But in the case of children, it's 196 countries have ratified it. And the only country that hasn't ratified it is the United States. And the reason they haven't ratified it is that the Senate or the Congress, whatever, I think it's the Senate, doesn't agree with the freedom of children to decide their own in a way, have a view on how they should be brought up. And in particular in relation to things like religion. So it remains unratified. I say, yes, I think children should be introduced to these concepts, but it's not without its controversy, because children's rights might interfere with adults' rights or parents' rights. But that's the sort of thing that can be teased out, as we might have a view on.
Yes, I want to, even though, Bulent, you didn't ask me this question, but I would like just to share that when it comes to children, we talk about the right to play. We did mention that in the charter. And the issues that related not necessarily in UN, even in this side of the world, is the autonomy and self-directedness that children don't have when it comes to leisure. Everything is planned by the parents. There was a very interesting study by my colleagues. I was just a co-investigator about trying to give, not to give homework during a certain holiday for children, and to see what's happened when they don't have a structured homework. And it was amazing how they flourish, and they came up and showed their things. But that needed to be with the endorsement by the parents, by the teachers and everything. And on the other side, there's a lot of parents and teachers that are against getting rid of homework, and they think that this is the way to go, not to waste any moment of free time on something which is not academic and could not bring you up on the social status or into a good university. So we have an issue here which is cultural based, and we need to definitely address it in that respect. The top-down versus the bottom-up, the autonomy, self-directedness, what are we going to do here? So sorry, I tried to answer Tony, but I want to answer your other questions. And I know your energy very much, Bulent, as a new member of our journal board. Definitely, we would welcome a special issue. And as Tony said, we are now drafting a paper on leisure and human rights, with the intention to call upon more people to come and to join us and come up with that. And I trust on your support, Bulent, with your great ideas to have some people from Turkey or other places with your great network to contribute to that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Good, okay. So if no further comments, I hand over to Christina. The ball is in your hands.
Thank you very much. Well, today in this webinar, we draw our attention to leisure as a human right. But of course, we cannot avoid speaking about other issues that concern us and are related to leisure, such as the concept of leisure, how it is understood in the different contexts of the world, especially when there are so many people from different regions. Or, I mean, at present, we cannot avoid speaking about the contribution of leisure for well-being. Well, I mean, I pick up these ideas, and I mean, please send us your suggestions, because I mean, we will be willing to organize more debates and regarding the topics that you would like to debate with us. Before we finish, I would like very quickly to show you the web portal that Atara mentioned before, where you can read, upload the different documents regarding the WLO Charter for Leisure. So this is the website of World Leisure Organization, and maybe Atara, very briefly, you can explain them about the different documents. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Christina. There is a welcome note for me, thanking people and telling you. And when you go to the welcome note, when you click on that, for example, here, when you click on here, you will get directed to the other circles that I presented in my presentation. So we talk about the articles, and then the context. There's the context here, which gives you all the history that we tried in a nutshell to present today. And the next one is the material for governments with all the important information that you can use, including groups, you know, equal opportunities, sport, art, and everything. And educational material, with the courtesy of Tony, we've got some questions. As I said, you need to think how to reshuffle those materials specifically to your own context, because different contexts have different things. If you scroll down, you see some of those questions. As Tony said, those are more for high school or tertiary students. Some of those questions in some of those contexts may not be responded or even cannot be asked. So you have your own views and add some more. And then comes the bibliography, which states some publications, and we are very happy for you to add some more document resources, text on human rights, on leisure, and children play. To respond to you, Bulent, we have some here, and environment and heritage, and so on and so forth. Sport, art, culture, tourism, traveling, and so on. And the last one is just talking about the process to acknowledge what we've done and all the people that contributed, and to ensure that we are not alone in this boat. And if you click here, start typing, when you look at the word, you can actually have your own input, and we would welcome to have some of those things in here, where the cursor here. So that's it.
Thank you very much. As you said, this is the beginning of a process. We will start disseminating the Charter for Leisure, as well as opening a dialogue with the different stakeholders of the leisure community. And thank you very much, Tony and Atara, for leading this process of the revision of the Charter for Leisure, and for your wonderful presentation today. I think this is a historical moment. It will be a milestone in the history of World Leisure Organization. And thank you very much, all of you participants, for your contribution today.
Okay, hope to see you all soon, okay? Be in touch. Don't wait for another Zoom, please. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Very good.
So,